a retired homicide detective. I've interviewed thousands of people, from serial killers to ministers. Welcome to the interview room. Welcome to the interview room, everybody, on this wonderful Monday evening. We're so grateful that you're here. I'm so grateful that each and every one of you support this channel. A big thank you to all of our mods, our Patreon members, our subscribers, and of course, our guest. Tonight, we have a special program with Dr. Brucato and I, and we want to, if you're not familiar with Dr. Brucato, I want to let you know that this gentleman is an amazing human being who's written this book over here. And the name of this book is The New Evil, Understand the Emergence of Modern Violent Behavior. He studies, he's a visiting scholar at Boston College where he collaborates with Dr. Ann Burgess and Dr. Victor Petrarca on forensic research. He studies, among other things, how violent thoughts and emerging psychotic and non-psychotic persons, how those thoughts fit into those types of personalities. He's also the co-author of the largest mass murder database research in the world. There's over 119 years worth of data that he compiled. And he's also the author, as like I said, of The New Evil, Understanding the Emergence of Modern Violent Crime, with his dear friend, who has unfortunately gone to the other side and is waiting for us, Dr. Michael Stone, who is a legend in forensic psychology. A link to his book, to Gary's book, is below. Also, we have two special guests tonight. We have the brother of Rachel Morin, Mr. Michael Morin. Welcome to the program this evening, Michael.
Thank you, Chris.
You're very welcome. And Matthew McMahon, who is the ex-husband of Rachel. And welcome, Michael, or Matthew, to the show.
Thank you, Chris.
For those of you that just joined us, if you missed us last night, Dr. Gary and I, Matthew was gracious enough to come on here to talk about Rachel a little bit. And we're going to really dive into a little bit more about her life this evening. There are many details were brought to light today by the Sheriff's Department. And we will also want to tell everybody, how grateful we are to the Bel Air area and all the support that this family is receiving and has received. I know they are grateful for everything that everybody has done, and specifically for the efforts of the Sheriff's Department back in Maryland, as well as the Los Angeles Police Department, who has been working this in conjunction and in coordination with the Sheriff's Department back in Maryland. Just remember, this case is about Rachel. It is not about anybody on this panel. And we on this channel always support families and friends to the victims. We are victim-centered. We are victim-centered at the Cold Case Foundation, as well as victim-centered here in the interview room. We only ask one thing, is that you hit that button that says subscribe, and unfortunately I even have to say that. But what's important about why you do that is because then you can send it off to all of your social media networks. And we encourage you always to share this information with everybody that you know, whether it's Twitter or, you name it. Just send it out there into the world and make people aware of the hunt for the killer of Rachel Morin. So remember, this is the Hartford Sheriff's Department is the lead agency on this in Maryland, and we have to be sensitive to them. So tonight, we are grateful that Matt's back with us, and of course, Michael, for the first time for us to meet him. And last night, Matt provided a tremendous amount of insight into Rachel, and he also shared some of her struggles in life, as well as her successes that she overcame. And she was able to turn a light on, as Dr. Gary says. Gary, what you're saying about the light in darkness?
Well, I don't remember exactly what you mean. I think what you're referring to is we were talking about how one of the very powerful things about this case is to think of Rachel and the offender as representing two sides of two ends of a spectrum, where two people that have experienced adverse experiences, one of them takes it out on people and becomes a kind of a cruel, horrendous human being who feels entitled and murderous and everything else, and the other channels it into strength and overcoming adversity and being kinder to people than perhaps life has been to them. And I think it says a lot about the character of Rachel, and the low character of the individual that we're dealing with here. So I think that I think that's what you're referring to.
Right. And so tonight, let's talk about some new details that came out. There will be a link to a podcast to the Sheriff's Department, the Hartford Sheriff's Department. They put a podcast out. It's about 40 minutes long. You'll have that link below. So after the show, we encourage each and every one of you to please go over and listen to it. These are details that are coming directly from the agency, and we're not going to deviate from them in any way, shape, or form, and or compromise their investigation. What we want to do tonight, friends in the chat, is support the investigation as it's going forward, as well as support the family. They need your help. And the efforts that I think we can help collectively can make a difference. There was an attack in this house in South Central Los Angeles. Today, a sketch was released in relationship to that particular crime. As you heard last night, I mentioned that there was a hat involved in this, and they confirmed that today in this podcast, that this is the type of hat that the suspect left at the scene. It's my understanding that is probably where they got the DNA. And what they did is, obviously, they take a swab and they went around the rim of that hat, and they came up with a genetic match in relationship to the killer of Rachel and the attacker seen leaving that house. The crime originally came out as what they call a hot prowl. And what that means is there were people inside of the residence, either asleep and or going to sleep. They may not necessarily have been asleep. A hot prowl burglary means somebody's in the house that doesn't belong into the house. In Los Angeles, the case went from a suspect breaking into the home. He did not come through the front door. They're not saying what the point of entry is at this point, because that could sign off into something in relationship to his MO. Okay? So they're leaving the point of entry out, and there's a reason for that, so we're not going to go there. However, once inside the house, he violently, quote, and physically attacked, quote, two family members, including, quote, minor children, end quote. So that means a whole bunch of different things from what we were talking about last night. Dr. Brucato and I were talking today, and we're going to continue our assessment in relationship to the psychological aspect of this individual and why it is important to capture him and why it is important to share this information around. As you recall, if you were to watch last night's program, it was our assessment that this guy was involved in an altercation in the house and that somebody had pushed him out through that door. Well, today that was confirmed. And so this gives us a whole new understanding of who this perpetrator is. And so with that, Gary, let's talk about Richard Ramirez and why this is important for this guy.
Well, the fact of the matter is that one of the things that's being speculated about this offender, particularly when we look at what happened in Maryland, is that he has a lot of the characteristics of either a budding serial killer or a serial killer whose second offense required for that definition hasn't been identified yet. When we look across the annals of crime, there are very few serial killers who start out or during the course of their period of offenses break into houses and physically assault people without there being a clear sexual aspect to it. And the fact that it's an entire family is also unusual. Because this idea of expressing domination and control through just using your fists, being explosive and violent with people, particularly if they're sleeping, it's very uncommon. And one case in which we saw that was Richard Ramirez, also a California-based offender, where the family was partially Mexican. They were of Mexican origin, and he had a father that was constantly going over the border for periods of time to work. And he was raised by a mother and had a kind of conflicted family dynamic going on. And the reason he's important to understand is that he was a guy who really started out breaking into houses with a mixed series of motives, partly to rob them, sometimes for sexual assault, and sometimes just to violently assault the people that were in there, often while they were asleep. And when we look at offenders like that, as I said, there are a few of them. For example, the serial killer Tommy Linsells is very similar. That the ones who do this tend to have qualities in common. And one of the qualities they tend to have is that they're highly transient people that don't really live in one place. They don't know where to lay their head. That we find them moving all across the state or across the country. And the second quality, which I think is also reflected in the transience, is that they don't really have any sense of home. And as a consequence, are extremely envious of people who do. As a secondary motive for people like this, when you really sit them down and talk to them once they're incarcerated, is they experience an enormous envy of people that are happy in a home. And part of the motivation for them is to go in and basically introduce chaos, punish those people for having a nice, happy, normal life. So that what you have to understand is that underneath whatever manifestation there is of either sexualized violence or just rage is a person who is sort of pathetic and doesn't really have a clear sense of belonging anywhere. And I think we're probably going to find that this is true of this individual too. And that's part of what's making this so difficult, is this lack of a clear home base is making him feel like somebody that can pretty much slither anywhere. But I do think that the clues are indicating that one way or another, he has some kind of base in LA. Now, the other thing that's important about the Ramirez case is that it was ultimately the public that stopped him. By saturation of the public with his image, you wound up having him on the front cover of newspapers, and some women in a store saw him in the store and started screaming in Spanish, "There's the monster." And some men basically subdued him, beat him, and kept him until the police came. And I would not be surprised if it is the public that also plays an enormous role here. So I think those points are important because it tells us something about the profile of the individual, that you've got a home invasion quality. It also tells us that this is a person who is profoundly risk-taking, because it's a very unusual thing, to kind of break into somebody's house like that. But there's also the potential for there being a lot of people. If you haven't cased the place, you don't know who's in there. You could encounter a whole slew of people who pin you down. And finally, what I'll say is, now that this new information is out, is I can't help but believe that, and this was true with Ramirez too, that at least some of the people were sleeping at the time of the break-in. And this is extremely important because we have to take the pieces of information we have and put them side by side between Maryland and what happened in LA. And in both cases, it appears that there's an assault on a person who is not conscious. In one case, there's somebody potentially sleeping, and the other, somebody who has been blitzed with some kind of rock or something, right? And this tells us another thing about this individual, that if people are awake and see you, for instance, you're not in the pitch dark attacking them when they're asleep, they probably wouldn't think you were particularly scary, or they would think you were some kind of a fool. So that what you have is a person who uses the cloak of that to feel more powerful than he is. And that tells you a great deal about this individual too. So imagine an individual who feels unwanted, pathetic, has a chip on his shoulder, an extreme temper, is a person who is extremely envious of people who are loved, and likes taking advantage of people who are in a totally compromised position to compensate for feeling sort of pathetic. And I think somewhere in there you'd have this individual. Wouldn't you say, Chris?
I think you nailed it, Gary, as always. And so with that, Dr. Brucato and I thought about messaging the Hispanic community in South Central Los Angeles, which is critical, we believe, because we have a sense that he has some type of root structure and or family structure and or friend structure with inside of that particular region. So I've asked Dylan to step up here tonight and read a message to the Hispanic community. Those of you that know Dylan, you've been with us from day one, but a lot of people, you probably weren't aware that he is fluent in Spanish, and he's going to give a message here to our Spanish friends. So if you know somebody who can hear this information, we're going to clip it, and we would ask you to please share it with inside of the Spanish community there in South Central Los Angeles, as well as any other Spanish neighborhoods or Hispanic neighborhoods in the Maryland area. So let me add Dylan here real fast, and he's going to read the message.
How's it going? Here is the message. Hola a todos. La familia de Rachel Morin necesita su ayuda. Rachel fue asesinada por esta persona. Era madre de 5 hijos. Su vida no debería haber sido arrebatada o perdida. La persona que hizo esto es peligrosa y no ha sido capturada. Si ha visto a esta persona, si sabe quién es, por favor ayuda. Si ha visto a una persona usando este tipo de gorra, por favor ayuda a esta familia, por favor. Hay una recompensa de $35,000. Puede permanecer en el anonimato. Si sabe quién es, llame al 410-836-7788 o envíe un correo electrónico a rmtips@hartfordsheriff.org. Quizás lo haya visto en su barrio, quizás sepa quién es posible que lo haya visto en sus tiendas locales. Hágalo saber a su familia en México, Centroamérica y en Latinoamérica. Si vive en el área central, sur de Los Ángeles, mira a esta persona, lo reconoce, lo ha visto en su barrio. Compártelo con sus vecinos y amigos y en las tiendas locales donde compra. Esta persona todavía está ahí afuera. Es peligroso para todos los miembros de la comunidad y para su familia. Necesitamos atraparlo. Necesitamos su ayuda, por favor. Puede permanecer en el anonimato. Llame este número 410-836-7788. Recoge la recompensa de $35,000. Ocupamos su ayuda, por favor, y si lo vean, por favor, hay que llamar ese número o enviar un correo electrónico a rmtips@hartfordsheriff.org. Muchas gracias.
Okay, folks, there you go. What we're going to do, thank you, Dylan. What we're going to do is clip that, and we would ask you, once it's clipped, it will be done after the program tonight. Take that piece in Spanish and spread it through every social network in the South Central Los Angeles area. Okay? Please, would you please do that in any other neighborhoods in the Maryland area around the Ma and Pa Trail? You don't have to speak Spanish. All you have to do is share it. Okay? And the message is clear for those who understand what those points were. Okay, so that said, let's talk a little bit about this hat. Did a little research on this hat. I hope the Sheriff's Department is listening. If you have not already checked the RN number on this hat, please look at the label for the RN number. It is a number issued by the Federal Trade Commission. You can go and look that number up. You can find out where that hat was distributed in relationship from where it was manufactured to its point of shipment to its final resting place in a retail location. I've looked around. The two buttons at the top tell us it could possibly be a knockoff that maybe Walmart may sell. Okay. So we would ask you to go to the Walmart local near the Maryland area and or the LA area and see if they have film and or an inventory of this type of particular hat. This is the Michael Jordan jump hat. And the label on the front obviously is, just something that the kids in the hood, keep on there to make them feel that it's as if it was important. This hat is critical. The police have this hat. So if you look at the sketch they've done with the individual to the right there, take a look at that and see if, in fact, that individual is familiar to you. If you believe he is, then pick up the phone and call either LAPD or call the phone number 410-836-7788 and immediately report that information that you may have. It is a very small, minutia piece of evidence that the police are seeking and the Sheriff's Department. Please, you could be the difference in that very small piece. If you have a moment, pick up the phone and call them and let them know the information you may have. You could be the recipient of that reward. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about the location. Last night, Matt, you had mentioned this particular area of where Gary and I were talking that this was probably a blitzkrieg type of attack, and then you sent me this picture today with the two tunnels over to the right. Can you let our audience know, and Michael, if you guys would give us some education on this particular area, we would be grateful for that and be interested in learning more about this particular geographic region here.
Michael I can speak to it if you prefer, but I know Michael has spent countless hours down on this trail and in those tunnels. I think he's probably the foremost expert on that area right now.
Okay, Michael?
Yeah, where that photo is, it's actually like a bend, where it's kind of goes at a 90-degree angle. And in August, there's a lot more foliage. It's completely covered, and just being back into the woods 10 feet, with the weight of the trees and everything would be enough to cover someone. And myself, my wife, and a friend of mine spent a lot of time down there actually running scenarios, and not even having earbuds in or anything, and just 10 feet into the woods, and then myself walking. It very easily someone could overtake me in just a matter of seconds without me knowing it. Me being alert and everything else, and so I mean that's kind of the impression that I have being in there. I do think that it was a blitz attack. I think he was waiting in the woods, kind of right where the picture is showing. There's a log there. I think that he might have been off to the side or something. But right around there, I think that based off of being there and the scenarios that we ran, it's really I was shocked actually how quickly my friend was able to, basically apprehend me. So that's kind of what I think happened. I think he ran out, blitzed her, and then I don't know if there was an initial, if he struck her, and then continued to bring her into the woods, into the tunnel, which may be, I don't know.
I see this. It looks like there's a gap underneath that log that you were talking about, and it looks like a trail. Is that a natural path going down towards that ravine there?
To the right, it looks like where Heavenly Water stream goes through. There is a little deer trail there, which wasn't so pronounced. It is more so now, just because of more foot traffic.
Okay.
But yeah.
And the stream, what's the water flow like at that time?
That time, I wasn't in Maryland for the week before. I mean, it can vary, but it's kind of a steady flow, not very deep at all. The deepest is probably, 1.5 feet where there's like holes. Yeah.
Was it going through the tunnel?
Yeah. So it starts on the right side of the photo that's up, and then it goes through the tunnel, and then continues kind of in this opening where it's surrounded by highway. And then there's another set of tunnels that go through to the other side of the trail.
Okay. And the highway above it, where does that run?
It's a bypass. So it just connects to, I don't know what the road is.
Interstate Route
Yeah.
1.
Yeah,
Route
Route
1.
24.
Yeah. Interstate Route 1. It goes the whole length of the East Coast.
So is that a really heavily traveled particular roadway then?
Oh, absolutely. It's like a highway. So it's like a little,
Okay.
it's a bypass. So it's right next to the mall and shopping centers, very close to it. So
Okay. How far is the mall from this location?
as the crow flies, if I had to guess, I would say, maybe,
Half mile?
I'd say a little less than a half a mile, maybe a mile.
Okay. Would it be fair to say that have the authorities mentioned to you that the day in question, what the sound ambience was like?
No.
Mm-mm.
Nope.
Okay. She disappears originally between 6 and 7 p.m. Is that correct?
Yes.
And her car is found how far from this location?
I'd say probably about a third of a mile.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's about a 10-minute walk.
about a 10-minute walk into this point, and there comes a place now, if I'm walking from her car, is it near where these carts are, or is it from, the bottom of the screen this way in, or is it this way out? Which way was?
The car would be behind the camera.
Okay,
I was walking down the trail and I took this photo as I was approaching the turn.
Okay, so she would have gotten up to this particular juncture here, this bend, and that would have given him the moment of surprise, obviously from the right side of the woods, and or the left side of the wood, either coming through and then pulling her in towards the ravine. Would that be an accurate assessment?
Yeah.
Is
So
that you figured out, Michael?
yeah, like where this photo is, that's where the bend is. You'd have to go left, but like exactly where this photo is would be the spot where you could intersect someone on the trail, and it's a straight shot to those tunnels. So that would be that'd be what I would think would make the most sense strategically.
Yeah,
Okay.
and in the summer, there's a lot of foliage to obscure your view. It would be really easy for somebody to be off the trail and not be seen. Even in the fall, with the absence of leaves, if you go back to those tunnels, which would be further than I would suspect that the suspect would have been, people walk by and they have no clue that you're there. That's without foliage. So in the summer, you could be so much closer to the trail and people would be clueless that you're there.
Okay. Did she run with earbuds or earpods?
Yeah, AirPods
Okay.
all the way up.
Okay. So she may not have heard him coming. Is there any indication he could have been behind her? Do we know?
I don't know.
Hey, Michael?
Yeah, I'm not I don't know. All I can say is from early on when I didn't have any information, just being there, and I really believe that he went there with an intent to commit a crime, and he had a plan, and when you're in that situation, it's possible he was somewhere else, but the foliage is not as dense. If you to the left of the photo, straight forward, it's really dense. So intuitively, that would be the spot. It's just and my wife and my friend agreed as we spent some hours out there like running these different scenarios. So it's possible.
Hey, Gary, what are your thoughts?
Well, my understanding is that whatever the blitz style attack was, that it was to the side of the head that would correspond with a right-handed individual hitting you from behind, and he does appear from the door video to be right-handed. My sense is that first of all, there can be no question that this place was selected for its proximity to these tunnels, and that this individual knew this kind of esoteric piece of information that these were even there, so that there is a little bit of a setting up of an ambush. You also have, as I understood from the podcast, a kind of a slight curvature of the road that would also help, as I understand it, with concealment. That was the way it was explained on the podcast. So the real question for me is this, and this also was raised on the podcast. You have two completely different potential scenarios. One is that this is an individual who, sort of like a spider, sets up a trap and then basically waits for a woman to come jogging by, and whoever that woman happened to be, she was going to be attacked from behind and pulled into that tunnel for whatever he wished to do, with the person unconscious. The other possibility is that he had been some days in the area and had seen Rachel and knew the routine that she would do this kind of run, and then decided to specifically target her. The trouble is there's no evidence one way or the other at this time. Based on the behavior as we understand it in the house, he doesn't sound like too much of a person who cased the place and knew what was going on in there. He just went in there with a kind of an appetite and got explosive, and the chips fell where they might, which is more suggestive of a person that would just set up a kind of an ambush for pretty much anybody that went by that might be a victim. But I think the jury is out on that, and that is one of the pieces of information I'm most interested in finding out. The one thing that gives us a clue about it that's interesting is that this is, I think, without question, an organized offender, because he did a lot of the things that we know organized offenders do, like concealment, like ambushing somebody with a blitz-style attack, playing out a very particular fantasy, doing things where you're in very, very high risk, and yet you do it in such a way that people aren't going to see you. A more disorganized person, like a person who was intoxicated or psychotic or something like that, would just do it right out in the open, wouldn't make any effort to conceal at all. But I think it's pretty obvious this is an organized guy. And that's important because when you're dealing with organized criminals, they do tend to have a very particular fantasy that they're playing out, that they have thought about in advance. And the idea is they now need to cast the fantasy by going out and finding somebody to play it out with. But what they're doing to that person has nothing to do with that person. That person is the object of displacement of feelings that have to do with something else. So obviously the idea here is he is looking for a female to take out some kind of feelings of need for domination or control, and he's literally there waiting for the person to do it with. Chris, would you say that in that home invasion that there's a high probability that when he went in there and people were sleeping and so forth, that he was looking for a woman? Or do you think that?
Most definitely.
Well, because that would be the only thing that would sort of allow the match between the offenses. Otherwise, they look very scatterbrained and random, like a kind of free-floating hatred of anybody. But it would make more sense if the idea was to go in there looking for a female. Now, in the Ramirez case, when he would go in and there'd be a couple sleeping, he would rapidly attack the male to eliminate them when the interest was the female. And of course, there was a symbolism in that because it's sort of Oedipal, you knock dad out of the way and you get mom, that kind of thing, which played very much into the story of Ramirez, that envy of the relationship between them. But in this case, it's hard to tell. But I would guess that the central focus was probably to go in there and find a female, because I think we are going to find out that this is ultimately, like most of these organized offenders.
Yeah, so there were witnesses that saw him on the trail as well. The sheriff's office revealed.
Yeah.
And so that tells us a whole bunch also about his personality. So here we have an individual who was comfortable enough to go into a home in Los Angeles where people are present. And so he's very comfortable in doing that. And now we have a geographic region here across the country where he's hanging out on a jogging path, which he probably had to do his homework on in relationship to recognizing, a target-rich environment, for lack of a better term. And so that means he studied this particular area. And he chose this area not by accident, but by, strategic advantage to lower his risk level. And the fact that there was a lot of foliage up there, Michael, that you're describing, and the fact that he has these tunnels in the background could potentially tell us a little bit about his understanding of not only his concealment capabilities, but his escape capabilities. And that means he's going to repeat those types of behaviors when he left Maryland. And why it's even more important for the folks in Los Angeles, if in fact he bounced from here, and he's wearing a Michael Jordan hat. So of course Michael Jordan played for the Chicago Bulls. So maybe this was the clue that the cops were going off of when they made a couple of visits up to Chicago. Okay, they're probably thinking maybe this guy's got some roots up there or something, and they may have information to that effect. Okay, but you don't wear a Chicago Bulls hat and break into somebody else's house while they're sleeping by accident. It's because he has a sense of, I don't know, Gary, what would you call it? I mean, he's got this grandioso effect, right? What would you call it?
Well, I mean, I think consistent with a lot of people in that sort of narcissistic, psychopathic, sadistic nexus, there is a tendency to be overly confident, to get aroused by risk taking, to kind of, sometimes take ever increasing chances because it sort of does something for you psychologically. But there is a little bit of scheming involved in this situation, so that we begin to understand that this is not an imbecile. I mean, I wouldn't think of him as a genius, but he's not an imbecile. He's at least average to slightly above average intellect, because you're talking about a person who did kind of come up with a way that he could conceal himself, and did manage to successfully get out of there, after doing this horrendous thing. Also, I wonder if he was aware that there aren't cameras there. And I'm still very struck by him even knowing that those tunnels were there. Maybe Michael and Matthew, you could tell us, I mean, would the average person who lived there and took that trail know about those tunnels, or would you have to be somebody who... So how would you discover them?
I don't know how you would discover them. I mean, I've lived in this county and in Bel Air most of my life, and I had no idea those tunnels were there. And I hear that all the time, that nobody knew that those tunnels were there. I mean, Michael, I mean, you spent a lot of time in your youth in that area. You even told me that you taught Rachel how to run on that trail. Did you know about those tunnels before this?
Yeah. I mean, you can see, now that I know what to look for, you can see the tunnels without the foliage, but I don't know what it is, the way that the path is. Even when there's no leaves on the trees, it's like you don't really see them. But yeah, I mean, for years, 20 years, I've been going on the trail, running through the woods, when I was younger. And yeah, I didn't even know they were there when we were looking for my sister, actually. When she was missing that day. The tunnels that could come after this, I knew about them, which were deeper in the woods, and but I still didn't know about these. So I don't know. I know a lot of homeless people know about those tunnels, and a lot of people that do drugs and stuff. There's a lot of spray paint in there. I would imagine, like, if you grew up in the neighborhood, to go play in the woods, they would go explore and, find that. So I don't know if he had a family member, speculation, of course, but, that lived in the area, and he was brought there by a cousin or something when he was younger or something. But you wouldn't be able to, it'd be very, lucky to find that location, and so I don't believe that it was luck.
If I go through that tunnel, what's on the other side?
The other side, the stream continues. There's a little like pond, and then you can continue, going. You can kind of walk around the stream on the left or the right. The left is a little bit quicker, but then it hops to another set of tunnels that are almost identical, and you can go through those tunnels and pop out, further down on the Ma and Pa Trail.
Okay, so theoretically, you could just continue straight through those tunnels, or through this set of tunnels, get through a water source of some sort. Do I have to go up on the embankment, or can I walk through the water source?
No, this is something, when I was out there, I had spoken with detectives and some other people, and they were under the impression that, it wasn't a accurate thought. But when you go on the other side, you pass through these tunnels. It's like entering a different realm or something. It's huge embankments. There's like a knoll, and the sound of the highway. It's like you could. It's like you feel vulnerable, but you're completely safe to do whatever you want. It's kind of a weird kind of space. But yeah, there's a lot of exit points if you go through the backside of that tunnel, to go to different spots.
And correct me if I'm wrong, just because I actually chose not to walk through those tunnels because the water does get significantly deeper at the far end, I think closer to knee deep. But isn't the far end, when you exit the tunnel, kind of like a triangle in the center of where different highway parts meet? So you're in a secluded area that's cordoned off by the different sections of the highways?
Yep.
Michael? Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Right. So then you're in that little tiny triangle that's effectively cut off from all the different homes and businesses.
Yeah, trees, embankments, and then the sound of the highway, So, yeah.
So what I'm trying to think through here is his risk level in relationship to his escape. Okay? He's probably not going to turn around and come back in the same direction that he just abducted your sister. Okay? He's going to try to look for a circumstance in his advantage. Out of all of these scenarios that you've run through, which is the best circumstance to his advantage, in your opinion?
Well, I would say, to preface, I strongly believe that this was planned. He went there to do this, and I have my reasons. I can't get into, but it was certainly planned. So if it was planned, even if it was just something that he was, thinking about, like fantasizing about, it was further than that. He planned it. So if he planned it, I don't think that it was something where he goes, okay, as a crow flies, go to a safe place. I would imagine he would plan his escape. So, I mean, his exit would be, for me, there's so many different variables. I couldn't say what his exit would be just because I don't know, where he would go after. So, but he certainly, going through the tunnel, you could, there's a lot of concealment, depending on where his home is,
But Michael, just to clarify something, do you mean that you have reason to suspect that it was plotted, including that your sister would be the target, or do you mean plotted that he was going to capture someone to carry out that fantasy?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think I can say that. I think that, from what witnesses have said about what he was wearing wasn't appropriate for anyone, at that time, unless he was planning something like this. And I don't know if it was, planning for my sister, but I believe that he was planning, to just kill someone. I don't know if it was my sister or not.
You mean because of clothing that was inappropriate, coverings or something like that?
Yeah, a bunch of different dynamics to it that, kind of, there's no other reasonable explanation.
I guess he learned from the incident where he was, walked out shirtless, and
Yeah, he was layered up.
that he was too nude.
And I'd like to agree and add a little bit more. So I do feel like he went there with the intention to doing this to somebody, not necessarily to Rachel, but I do think there's the possibility, since Rachel frequently ran on this trail, he may have seen her, and when he saw her that day, he might have remembered her, and he may have acted on that. But I don't necessarily think he went there that day with the plan, I'm going to go after Rachel. But I think there's a distinct possibility he may have seen her before, but we don't know.
Right. So there's what they call the victim risk continuum. And if you think about, I'm going to write it out here for you. This is a classic type of situation. And I'm sure your buddy from the BAU talked to you about this. Just writing it out here. So this is what they call the victim risk continuum, okay? Where you have environment, situation, and circumstance on this side, and you have low, medium, and high risk on this side, okay? And so the question is, what's the environment? Is that a low, medium, or high risk environment? This is obviously a medium risk environment, okay? Because just like anything can happen to anybody depending on how aware the victim could be, right? So then you have to ask yourself, okay, what's the situation? In this circumstance, the circumstance is your sister is running with a set of headphones on, okay, which moves her towards a medium risk to high risk type of circumstance, okay? And then the last one is, what is the circumstance? Well, she parks her car. She runs into this. How far? 10 minutes into it?
10-minute walk.
10-minute walk into it.
So
So
run
maybe
definitely quicker.
3/4 of a mile, potentially. Do we know the exact length?
I would say less than that.
Less than that, half mile. Okay. So in those circumstances, that moves her way over here to medium to high risk. The higher the risk, the more probability is that she was a targeted victim from a stranger. The lower the risk, the higher the probability is that it was somebody within her circumstances, i.e., there was what we call a contact point before the event ever occurred. So if you think about a kid, for an example, a child inside their bedroom, and they just disappear out of their bedroom. Okay? That is a very low risk circumstance, which means there's a higher probability that the suspect was known to that individual property and or at some point had crossed somewhere within inside of that victim's circle. Okay. In this particular case, he potentially could have seen your sister, but there is a higher probability that your sister was randomly a victim of opportunity. Okay. And that,
I think also, Chris.
yeah. And I think, Gary, I think, Greg and John and everybody would agree with us that, this is a circumstance that puts him at a higher risk of lowering his risk. Okay. So now we get into the thinker. That means this guy's a thinker. Okay. He's just not randomly showing up on this path, to your point, Michael. Okay. Not prepared to accomplish what his goal is. And in this goal, okay, it is a sexually driven fantasy. Okay. And Dr. Brucato can go on for days about that. Okay. And so that he targets any type of, victim that presented themselves, and your sister was a victim that presented herself, okay, for opportunity. But to your point, and the reason I wanted to know the geographical layout here in terms of where that tunnel went on the other side, that's going to tell us that he's comfortable by taking a risk to go out the other side. Okay. And that means he's comfortable with the environment on the other side of that tunnel. Okay. And so that again, we have to go into this idea of saying, okay, well, what's the thought process then of this guy? And why then is your sister so important in this particular narrative here? Okay. Because he depersonalized her.
Right.
Right, Gary?
Yes. And that's why one of the most important goals in our work so far, in speaking to Matthew and Michael, is to restore her to a fuller human person. Because you see the difference between the type of offender who wants to spend a lot of time with a person and sort of talk to them first and so forth. Is that a big part of the fantasy there, is playing out a very particular leveling of the playing field with the type of person. But with this kind of offender, there isn't much about the person that matters in the fantasy. It's just that they are a body, unfortunately. And I think that you have to understand is how hideous and vicious of a human being we're dealing with here. Now, one thing that I do want to ask about is, it is a shame that, as I understand it, they're only now putting cameras up on that trail. And one of the reasons I think it's a shame is that based on the behavior of previous similar offenders, there's a pretty high chance that this guy would have gone back to that tunnel after the attack. He probably would have gone back, if even for something as simple as seeing if he left anything there after the body was taken away, after your sister was taken away, your ex-wife was taken away. But it's also the idea of this very peculiar need for the excitement, risk-taking, the reliving, etc., which is very arousing to this type of person. And particularly if he's comfortable there, what we find is a lot of times in the cover of night or something like that, the person winds up lurking back around. They also sometimes visit burial places of the victim. A very common technique for luring people like this out, for example, is to monitor who it is that attends a memorial service. And we find that very often the offender pops up because they have a kind of curiosity about it. But that does tend to happen more when the victim is selected for reasons other than just randomness, where you've got a fantasy focus on the victim. But I would not be surprised if this guy has been back to that tunnel. Wouldn't you say, Chris, based on previous offenders?
Yeah, but I think 6 months into it, he's moved on.
Oh, yes. I mean, immediately after.
Yeah.
In the days, hours or days after the police presence was gone, this is somebody who would pops back there.
Yeah, I think, and the fact that, and forgive me from day one here, guys, the fact that the brutality of this, to your sister from, the head area, okay, that is very personable, but it's also extremely less risky, again, for the suspect. Okay. That the immediate need, the immediate, incapacitation to the victim gives us a clearer understanding of his drive. And Gary, explain what I mean by that in relationship to what's his drive here.
Well, you could mean a few things. I mean, first of all, we know that from offenders that target the faces and heads of victims, you get two types. You get the types that are doing it because they have a very intimate relationship with the person and they're very angry at them, so that we can see an overkill, for example, in cases like that. For example, in the infamous Lizzie Borden murders, where, even though she was acquitted, she was clearly guilty. There was massive destruction of the face of the father on the couch because she had a very personal gripe against him. So we can see that kind of thing. But you can also see, particularly when it's from behind, that the goal is simply to cause the person to become unconscious. Or it could be that because the person is making noise or yelling, that there's a desire to kind of cause the person to pass out. But my sense is, based upon the what went on, at least the glimpses we have went on in the house, that there was something about feeling inadequate unless the person is completely not awake. That I think figures into this story. But Chris, did you mean something other than that about what we know about head injuries and facial injuries in attacks?
No, where I think he is of this, sense now from the LA thing to Rachel.
Mm-hmm.
This depersonalization for him it's important now that we understand that this guy is not only brutal and vicious and evil as they come, And the blitz attack of this. But the fact now that he's out there still, potentially monitoring, movements. However, I don't think he's sophisticated enough.
No.
Would you, Gary? I mean, he is. I don't think he's like the mental capacity.
This is not Israel Keys or a genius level, kind of offender or something like that. No. Is that what you mean, Chris?
Yes, exactly. And Michael needs to step out just for a second.
Yeah.
Gary, wouldn't you agree? And Matt, you tell me your impressions of, from what you've seen out there on the trail. When you walk the trail, and to your point earlier, brother, where you said, I didn't even know these tunnels were out there. Okay? But once you knew they were there, right? You all of a sudden, I bet you started thinking about a myriad of possibilities and stuff. But wouldn't you think that the suspect probably would not have run back up onto the path and escaped from that route? Would you have thought he would have gone through that tunnel, or maybe I'm 1,000% off here?
Keep in mind that I'm not an expert. It's like I pay close attention to this case. I think about it every single day, but since I don't have expert training, it's just my guess. But I feel like it could go 50-50 either way. The reason I say that is going deeper into the tunnels, you're going into an area that is secluded, but you're also then cordoned off into a triangle of highways. So you're either kind of trapped or you have to go through other tunnels. You do have to go through deeper water. So it's a lot more work to go that direction. It's definitely more secluded initially, but then you either have to climb up and go over highways or cross through additional tunnels, and then you're back out to the trail anyway. Or the other way is you go back out that tunnel, and then there's so many different directions that you can go out. There is another path that's right up behind that one shot that I was telling you that goes up to a parking lot, and not many people go up that path. But you don't have to go up the paths either. You can just go through the woods, because it's not like there's any kind of fencing along the trail or the other side of the woods when you reach homes. So there really are a million different ways that you could exit. And I know I'm throwing out a bunch of different possibilities, but also at the same time, he's showing that he's okay with taking risks, not only because he broke into the LA home, but because on the trail, it is a heavily trafficked trail. In I think it was November when I was there with an expert, Michael and Shannon, his wife. We stood at that bend in the trail for 15 solid minutes, and there was not one moment that nobody was coming. And this was in November, and in August, it's definitely much more heavily traveled. So it shows that just because he attacked Rachel on a heavily trafficked trail, that he's okay with risk. So I think it's possible he could have exited a more risky route as well if there wasn't obvious signs of what he did on him.
Yep. And this is why it's important, right? And I appreciate your insight and input there. That's really important to understand, because this guy is. Don't underestimate the authorities need not underestimate this guy. Okay, he's not a serial killer yet, but Gary, he's building, isn't he?
Well, he's certainly building, or he has committed another offense we're unaware of. But he is certainly showing the kind of escalation, the apparent cooling off periods, that we generally see. This, he's also apparently honing an MO potentially that. We saw there are a lot of offenders who, embedded within a whole series of other crimes, have committed something like this within the larger picture. And I mentioned Israel Keys, who I think was a much more intelligent offender. But, like, for example, Israel Keys committed home invasions, but there was also an incident where the closest. Well, actually, it's not true. There were a number of times he went to trails, but there was an incident, for example, where he stood sort of wading in the water on a river where young women were coming down in rubber tubes down the water, and he stood very, very still, kind of like a reptile, perfectly still. And when there was no one else in sight except one woman on the tube, he snatched his hands together like that and pulled her out of the water and took her to a shed and did what he did. So that you have that quality that really makes you think of a reptile or some kind of predatory animal. And I think that, again, in that situation, it didn't matter who it was. It was just that was the woman who had broken away from the other people. And for just a split second, there was no one else there. Well, I guess I'll stop there, and I'll make other points later. But let's pick up where you left off.
So let's talk a little bit about this particular picture. Matthew, tell us about this photo.
Well, that's Rachel with our daughter, and that's a photo that my daughter sent me today to be used in the show. She selected 3 photos to share with the world. She very much wants the world to know who Rachel was, because it's important for her to have the world see her as the beautiful light that she was in the beginning when all this happened, and nobody knew about this suspect or what happened. There was all kinds of speculation and horrible rumors, and so she wants people to see Rachel. So that's why she selected these photos. So this is clearly a photo that meant a lot to my daughter, our daughter.
Michael, tell us about your sister.
Well, it's really kind of hard to describe a person. I heard something, I think it was on a TV show or something. It's, describe coffee if you've never had coffee before. And, a person is so much more than, coffee. So I can use words that can help describe her. But, it's impossible to, relay who she was as a person. She was just the life of the party, like you instantly, like if you were depressed or in a bad mood, she showed up. Like you wouldn't even think about it. You'd realize, like I would realize, oh, I'm in a good mood now. Like holidays were wicked fun. Like I loved it. Like she was the life of the party. She'd come in, 37 years of, a relationship, and then just having quirky, weird inside jokes, and everything was like sarcasm, so it's just, it's individual, so much life, funny, a lot of energy. It's just, but at the same time, like very, inside, like very sweet and precious, and just, so delicate and just beautiful. But yeah.
Your thoughts within inside of that tunnel are very profound. Share with the world. First of all, what was it like being in that tunnel and thinking about your sweet sister?
Well, being in the tunnel, at the time, I didn't really know how to process everything that was going on. And I guess I felt like I felt guilty for some reason. I felt some guilt and shame. And I don't know, I just, I went down a dark road and just tried to, I guess it is, I don't know if it's morbid or not, but put myself in that situation and say, like, I'm not going to look away or say I can't look at this or think about this, but instead, like, just open my mind to that, what she was thinking and feeling. And, yeah, it was just very painful. And I think it just really led to more guilt and shame, for myself and everything else. Like things I could have, I didn't say I love you as often. I can be kind of like a reserved type person, just being in there and just really kind of everything weighing on me. I don't know, just thinking about what she experienced and then having regret with not, being kinder to her. It just, that's, I don't know how to explain it. But
no, there's no wrong answer, brother. Trust us.
it's,
We
but I mean, that whole mindset, doesn't help. And, I think you need something, I was angry. I was very angry. I was very sad. I hate to say this, but for a while I was angry at God. And, it doesn't lead, there's no escape from that, and you need something deeper than, these thoughts that you get, shame and anger and guilt. And so I think, I experienced it and I was there, and I can say I deserve to feel bad and all this shame. But at the end of the day, it doesn't profit you anything. I don't believe it does to think that way. So
I wouldn't be mad at God. I would remember that God lost a son.
yeah, I'm not mad at God right now. In that time I was, and that's kind of what is deeper. Like I came to the conclusion, either my sister's life has no value. 100 years from now, no one's going to remember my sister. So either our lives don't have any value or they're priceless. And I came to the conclusion that they are priceless, and I believe in eternity. And, the deeper thing that I believe in is, objective truth, because people can say, life is short. That's why it's so valuable. But I think that's subjective. But objective truth, is Jesus, Jesus Christ. And taking all that fear, the shame, guilt, worry about, the future, the past, and just giving it all to Christ. And, that's where I found my peace.
That's beautiful. It's very beautiful. Chris and I often delve into the theological. I had studied to become a priest before I got into what I do, and I would remember that one of the most beautiful lines in the New Testament in Matthew 10:42, and it basically says that even giving somebody a cold drink of water is not forgotten in heaven. In other words, kindness has a permanence, because there's nothing that an act of love has a permanence in heaven. Just as I'm sure that these hideous things that this person did won't be forgotten either. But it's very important not to minimize ever in our minds the permanence of goodness, and that cannot be rubbed out by anything. Wouldn't you say, Chris? I think that's the thing that has to keep you going, is the idea that somebody comes into the world like a light, and it may not be here long, but it's caught, and other people have picked it up, and now they'll go out and spread it. One person like that can change many, many lives. Their life is certainly not in vain. It's remarkable what a person like that can accomplish in 1 year of life.
Yeah, and if we think about, the 3,000 people right now watching us, right?
Not to mention the 50 or 60,000 that'll see it by tomorrow.
If each and every one of you just take this light that Michael, Matthew, Dr. Brucato, and I are seeing just in this one picture alone, and share it with the world. Just share it with 5 people in your environment. And then ask them to share it with 5 people. And just see if we can get this cycle of goodness,
right,
for Rachel. And see if, because this perpetrator that has taken this light off the earth, he cannot eliminate it.
Right.
It's impossible to eliminate it because there are enough good people on the earth that can multiply it.
Right.
And if we think about the principle of the mustard seed, just that one mustard seed can build into a very large mustard tree with roots stuck in the ground that are immovable. Her life was the foundation to help us become better people. Here we are, all strangers, talking about the life of Rachel Morin. None of us knew who she was. We've never met her, but we can see in her countenance that the life and the goodness and the love for not only her family, but her fellow man. And so it's our responsibility now to take that and insert it into this environment. Insert that goodness into this environment to find out who this guy is and how in the world did he know this house existed in LA? How did he know that? Because he knew this home before he knew this light. And his darkness, which it is darkness, is still there. And it's our responsibility, I think, is not only in the mortal existence. Remember, we are eternal beings in a mortal journey. And that principle helps us to understand who this guy is.
Well, Chris, I think we could make a pretty educated guess that whoever this guy is, he didn't have somebody like her in his life. The fact is that this kind of person, everything about the behavior indicates that this is someone who did not understand the concept of being stably loved by somebody. And as a consequence, the person needs to go out in a nasty and ferocious way and snatch it. And, so that this is why it's so important to not get gobbled up into the darkness, because you don't realize that people are walking, as Michael Stone used to say, a tightrope between Buddha and Bundy, where every one of us can go one way or the other on the tightrope. And when we look back, we often find that it was people who helped form us, who guided us, who were kind, that said, not that way, this way. And I have no doubt that throughout her life, from everything we're hearing, she had that kind of effect. If we could see life from the other side, we would see that a lot of these little meanderings we do without light, we don't realize how many times we're pushing somebody in the right direction and altering their lives with simple things. I mean, the fact is, Chris, I have interviewed offenders who have told me that there were days that they were planning to do violent things and they didn't that day because somebody was nice to them. And I have also reviewed mass shootings where people go into a place with a weapon and they skip over the person who was nice to them. The fact of the matter is that all of us have that effect without realizing it. Wouldn't you say, Chris?
Yeah, and Gary, break down help people understand what his role models and who his circle of influence, or what's missing within that circle.
Well, the behavior certainly indicates a person who is angry about something, and the clues we get are that there's some sense of deprivation, which is compensated against with an entitlement, a quality of entitlement. So there's a person who is pissed off that he either didn't have home or love or women or gratification or of his needs, etc. So you get the sense of an individual who feels that life wasn't fair to him, so why should he play by the rules? And in addition to that, there's a person who clearly has absolutely no capacity to hold his temper. Remember, for example, thinking about this guy, remember that, as I said yesterday, this is a person who probably went, we don't know, he could live in Maryland and have gone to LA, or he could live in LA and have gone to Maryland. But what it looks like is that there was this assault in March, and then he goes to Maryland. So you have a person who's like sort of hiding out, and then even while hiding out, needs to commit an offense, which is worse. So you already have a sense of an impulsive guy, right? But the interesting thing about him is that he's impulsive at the same time that he's crafty and scheming. So in other words, you imagine a person that's like a slingshot that's pulled back all the way and then pauses and waits, and then the slingshot goes off. It hurts and it's intense and it's kind of ferocious. So what we have is a guy who has learned over time to have very, very, very intense feelings, but to be able to kind of to look cold and cool and collected in front of other people, right? Because nobody cared, and he has to look macho. So you have a person who's looking kind of cool and collected, and then once the feelings come out, it's an utter and complete explosion. And in that explosion, he becomes pathetic. And I think that's why what happened in the home invasion, it was literally a minor that boots him out of the house. Once he was discovered, I mean, it was like a kid that basically says, "Get the hell out of here," and gets him out of the house. So that tells you that what you're really dealing with is a person that when the lights turn on, he's sort of pathetic. And I think that's because the real essence of this is a person who feels small and unsafe and not very strong. So you have to picture somebody hiding behind a curtain of strength. And that's why I think the formative thing, what we're talking about, this idea of those of us who've been lucky enough to have somebody who loves us, I think we don't realize how fortunate we are, because if you have a certain kind of brain, particularly a psychopathic bent, and you haven't been loved, that's a recipe for disaster. But that kind of person, if they're loved, could be the kind of person who thinks, gee, maybe I could hide along the path and attack the enemy in war. Maybe I can outsmart the criminal. Maybe I could, but that kind of brain being applied towards hurting people is a result of nobody caring about you. So that's a very perfect storm, that you see in that kind of person. But I think, Chris, it's this person, when we find him, we're going to find out that he had extremely unstable attachments and was totally transient. He didn't really have a sense of home. And wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Do you sense that he's on the build again internally? And if so, what does that mean?
Is the slingshot being pulled back?
Yeah.
Basically, with this kind of person, what tends to set them off is a slight to the ego. So that what happens is, that they get most hungry to restore themselves to a sense of power when something has reminded them that they're small or pathetic. There are offenders like this, for example, who have said things like, a woman was walking down the street and hit me in the shoulder with her arm and never said I was sorry. So she had to be killed. That kind of thing. Something has to slight you, or you have to see somebody who reminds you of what you're deprived of. Home, a woman, love, whatever. And so that I have no doubt. Even though I suspect that she was going along the trail and he simply saw a flash of blonde hair and a person kind of, and he kind of came behind her. This is my strong sense. The truth is that she is clearly emblematic of everything that he didn't have. I mean, it's like it's almost strange how perfectly she would fit the bill of everything that he would envy and resent. And that's why part of me wonders if she was selected. So it's impossible to tell. But I think, Chris, the key is what I'm trying to say to people is you don't realize how powerful it is when you care about a person, because you could have somebody stewing that's thinking about doing aggressive things, and it really makes a difference in their life if someone gives a flying leap about them. So that's what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to make some kind of meaning out of these terrible tragedies to help people.
Does he strike again? And if so, in your experience,
Yeah.
I think now that, in my opinion, is he's going to maintain a very comfortable motive that he's created for himself here.
It's possible, but the trouble is that so far, if we take the two offenses, that they're so different that it's also possible that he's just a creature of opportunity that will use whatever it is around him in the moment. But people like that do gradually hone an MO. And it's impossible to believe that somebody motivated in the way you'd have to be to commit this offense would stop without being captured or killed or suicide or something like that. So that it's just, unfortunately, a matter of time until some other thing happens. The cooling off period between offenses, it was months. So that this is not a person who's on a spree, where he just kind of has to keep doing things over and over again. And it's been a while. I mean, we're talking about, almost half a year. And I haven't seen any good research to tell us the average length of a cooling off period. But for these kinds of people, it's like there's a long cooling off period where they're brewing, and then it's unleashed like the slingshot. So that's what I'm worried about is that it's especially ferocious when it explodes. And I think it really speaks to how urgently this guy needs to be caught. Because out there somewhere is some family that, is sitting down to dinner and watching TV and making jokes and making phone calls and exchanging text messages. And the next day, the person isn't going to be there anymore. And that's the thing. I mean, that's what we have to bear in mind is like, TikTok. There's no time to waste. You know what I mean?
And that's exactly what Michael and Matthew and their families have experienced. And it, right? I mean, there's no understanding that, right? That the universe is off schedule, and it's just craziness. And you guys are thrust into the middle of that barrel. And Michael and Matt, I mean, we talked last night, Dr. Brucato and I, and all of us together. I mean, Mike, you weren't there, but this idea of the suddenness of this, the feelings that you're feeling, Michael, are 1,000% valid, brother. I can tell you from personal experience. I mean, Matt, and Gary and I, we've all had our Gethsemane in our life. I mean, I lost a son 20 years ago in 2003. He was 20 years old. Okay? So that impact of that, okay, you can't wrap your mind around it. We get where you're coming from. Okay? But what's interesting here now is you also, I'm very proud of both of you. The fact that you're keeping your sister in the line out front, the fact that you are willing to expose your vulnerabilities of your suffering, you are strengthening somebody else. I can assure you of that and guarantee that. So, Vernon Gabert, who's probably one of the most interesting homicide guys ever in the world, has a saying in his book. He says, "We work for God." Hey, and in our homicide office, we used to have a big thing above our door, says, "Our day begins when your day ends." Okay. And we always had the philosophy, at least my team, our teams that I was involved in, it's you guys are the reason, okay, we keep going, but your sister is the reason we do what we do.
Right.
Okay?
Well,
And
Well,
Go
they're
ahead.
trying to help prevent any family from ever having to deal this again.
Yeah, you are preventing.
Right.
Yeah, that's an amazing point. And this is why it's critical, guys and gals, in the chat here, that we take a hard look at this flyer. This one is in Spanish because Gary and myself and others believe that Los Angeles is the key that is going to break this lock open. Okay. And we need to continue to focus in that area and support the Hartford Sheriff's Department in this area in Los Angeles, along with the LAPD homicide. Somebody in that area knows who this guy is. Please, we would ask you to hit that tip line, 410-836-7788. Share this. Again, we can't say this enough, with your friends, your neighbors. Because he's still out there, and it's going to just take one quick 30-second phone call to say, here's the dude. Or it's going to move a family member of his to realize that $35,000 to a bunch of federales is a tremendous amount of money. It's all right, buddy. Poor Michael, he swallowed his coffee down the other side. This reward fund in Latin America is significant. Please share it down there. If you have any connections with Telemundo or any type of media in Latin America or Central America or Mexico, please share this with them. Just, do a screenshot of this and send it to them, or call the tip line and see if you can get some flyers yourself and get them out there. Put it on every Facebook page, everywhere. Okay. Please share this information. We would ask you to do that.
And if I could say something about the tips too,
please.
Even if you think what you saw might not be relevant, or you might think it's insignificant, you don't necessarily know if it's insignificant or significant unless you're law enforcement and you know all of those details. Right. So even something that you think is insignificant, and even something that you think maybe 3, 5, 10 other people might have already sent the tip in, send it in and let them sort through it, because too many people are not sending in tips. And I can give you a real life example. A friend of mine just called me today and said that, a friend of hers saw the sketch, and she thinks that she saw this guy the day before Rachel was attacked. And the question was put out, did you put the tip in? And the answer was no. Yeah.
That is a solid advice, Matthew, and accurate. The PD can only go as far as the information provided by the public. At this point, this case depends on the cooperation of not only law enforcement agencies, but the public. The public will solve this crime.
Yes.
It'll be that, to your point, Matt, it'll be that simple phone call that says, look, I don't know if this has anything to do with anything, but you know what? I saw a guy and I think he matched the sketch. And you will have somebody at your door to say A, B, C, and D, and they'll walk you through the process.
Right.
But those are the types of things. That's exactly right.
Well, Chris, something else I'd add is that if this offender is anything like many people who do these things, with whom we are familiar, a group that may have been overlooked that should be talked to are sex workers in the area. And the reason is that these people very often relieve the aggressive and sexual tendencies they have by paying for encounters with people. And when you speak to them, not only will they recognize the person, but they will tell you some very important things about the fantasy life of the offender that they were made to do for money. Things that were a little too aggressive, things that were a little strange, being made to play dead, things like that. So very often with this kind of person, you discover that they've been lurking in the shadows and the red light districts and things like that. And they are that those are the people who are familiar with them. That, for example, figured very much into how they caught Arthur Shawcross, the serial killer in New York. Because those are the people that you would expect to know him. I mean, wouldn't you say, Chris, this guy, there's a strong, aggressive sexual quality to these offenses, and there must have been years, if he's feeling pathetic and small, that he would have probably been involved with sex workers. It's pretty typical.
Yeah, he's going to build up to just even breaking into feeling comfortable enough to get into this house. He's had some experience with, we used to call them Bs. 647B is the penal code for sex workers. So now one thing I want to point out to the public, and it would be really interesting for somebody to who's got a lot more skill than me, but I am still not convinced this isn't some type of tattoo or ink work over here on his right arm. Okay? I mean, you can barely see it when he comes out of that room. And let me go back here for a minute.
Chris, don't you think that if they saw him without a shirt, they would have described?
Well, I'm sure the victims may or may not. It all depends, right, Gary? I mean, they're caught up in the moment. The fight's going on right there. You can see kind of the discoloration on his arm here as he's coming out, but he moves it to see. You can just barely see it look like something. I can't tell personally if it's a shadow, if it's a tattoo. I'm not sure in full transparency here.
Yeah, it's too fast. I know what you mean. It looks almost like it could be some kind of like a umbra, that's on the arm.
Right. And if that's the case, see right there's a better shot of it.
Yeah, I see exactly what you're talking about. I think the jury's out on what that is, but there is
something. And I mean, Mike, do you guys see that, or am I seeing something that I shouldn't be seeing?
Yeah, no, I see it as well. I can't tell what it is.
Yeah.
I was wondering.
Yeah, I was told that there were no tattoos that were seen, but they don't say that there's no tattoos. Just because you didn't see it doesn't mean one isn't there. Because there's commotion, it might have been covered, but there were no tattoos that were reported on the guy.
But he could also have a kind of bruise.
But he could have one.
Right. Because there was a fight, right? I mean, this was... In other words, one-sided aggression, or did somebody get some clocks in, where this guy could have injuries on him? I mean, that was unclear from the podcast today.
The details of the altercation, all I know is what was put out specifically today. I knew that something happened. I had no details, so the extent of my details is that.
Right, but it is possible then that there's also an injury on him. We don't know.
Well, the bruising wouldn't have produced itself that quickly.
Right, that's true. Bruising would take a while, but it could be something.
It could be a shadow. It could be nothing. But just in case, we don't know. And, a lot of times, victims, to your point, Matthew, and everybody, the fight's on, and it's survival mechanism, right? Let's get this guy out of the house, and the fact that he had his shirt off, and he had his shoes off, I think. But the information that I had, I talked to some of my sources. That's how I knew about the hat. I don't know if the sheriff's office, was going to put that out today, but I figured it was important enough to let people stop, rumors about all this other stuff that was going on. We want to just deal with the facts here and make sure that we're not compromising anything the authorities have behind the curtains. But I am curious, really, when I see that, I can't dismiss it completely. But anyway, that said, what do you guys, any other thoughts that you may have in relationship to how we can help you, how the public can help your family, support your family? We're here, to help, and this platform, that's what we want to do. And so, what are your thoughts? And you talk about that behavioral video that you did, Michael. I forget the name of the gentleman, Tim, and he was with the BAU for a while, a long time. So that's a really well put together video. I'll put the link to it in our description to this particular show. But talk about that process and your sister in relationship to her personalization there. I think it's important for people just to know that she's still, physically she's not with us, but spiritually she's with us. She's here and she's going to help solve this case. I personally believe that. I've worked over 300 murders, and I can tell you, I personally believe, and that's just my own personal opinion, I've got a picture of the Savior right behind me. Okay. I believe, that they can help us from the other side, whatever that means. But I've had impressions from things where I just go, wow, this is weird. And then I lift up that rock, or I open that piece of paper or whatever, or that phone rings, and boom, there's resolution right there. And the universe is on schedule, is what I've always said. I really believe that personally. And so when I saw that picture or that video, I thought, wow, this is Rachel. This is a very well done understanding of who this individual and person is and victim. What were your feelings going through that? I can only imagine.
I think there's 3 videos. Was there one in particular? I think they kind of touch on different things. But I mean, I don't know which video, but yeah, I just kind of spoke freely and not too much. He didn't really point me in too many directions, just a couple questions that were, I guess, leading just so I would think about it. And then, then he would just take those parts, like a process of, speaking a little bit. And then after a while of speaking, just kind of flows from the heart, I guess, the experience. And then he just would capture those portions in the video. I think that would be the same for Matt and other, the other people that he videotaped. So, sorry, I don't know if I understood your question.
No, you're fine. That was a great answer. It was a screwed up question. Great answer.
Michael, how many people are there in your and Rachel's immediate family? How many people are there that are going through this in the immediate family?
You mean siblings?
Yeah.
Let's see.
It's a good number when he has to break out the hand.
No, I just see it's Rebecca, then Nathan, then me, Rachel, and then my brother John, and then my youngest brother Josiah. For siblings. So,
are both of your parents with you?
My dad died some years ago.
Oh, in a way, he was spared this having to deal with this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I believe he's up in heaven with my sister Rachel. So
your mom has been tireless in this process. How's she doing?
Yeah, it's been, it's devastating for all of us. My mom's very heartbroken, like anyone could say, which makes sense, but she's very sad, every day. So, crying every day and, maybe not getting as much food as she should get. But we prayed together, that this guy will be caught and it will be resolved. And we have to believe that, what was meant for evil, God is going to use it for good. And I do believe that. So it's just yeah, I don't know. I'm praying a lot there.
I've heard the most extraordinary stories of the effects on mothers of losing their children. For example, Ted Bundy, there was a day that he went out to Lake Sam in Washington and abducted 2 women on the same day, Ott Naslund, Denise Naslund. And Denise Nasland's mother, who was a very emotionally a powerful woman. I mean, she was like a tireless crusader after her daughter was killed. She never moved her daughter's car from in front of the house. She had the idea that in some weird mystical way, maybe one day my daughter will be back and she'll need it. And another story I heard about a very, very famous crime, but I promised the family member I would never reveal it outside of the conversation. But I could tell you without telling you who it was. There's a woman whose daughter was killed, as I said, in a very, very infamous offense. And she found out that a detective magazine leaked the crime scene photo of the daughter naked in a very humiliating position. And she drove up and down the entire state buying every single copy of the magazine, which still clutter the attic to this day, because every issue she bought would prevent one more person from seeing her daughter battered and nude and dead. I have heard stories like that so many times I can't even tell you. But there's something about a mother's love and that whole thing. I mean, it's just extraordinary. I'm strangely grateful to hear that your father didn't have to go through it. But there's something about losing your child before yourself that is just unspeakable. I mean, Chris knows better than anybody. And so please send her our regards. She's a force to be reckoned with. Does Rachel remind you of her? Did Rachel remind you of your mother?
I guess.
Like, who's she like?
I guess a combination of both. Yeah, my mom. Like, there's been a lot of stuff. A lot of heartbreak for my mom the past several years. That's kind of kind of compounded. But I would see parts of my mother and Rachel in some communications with the kids. Like they would be. My mom would say the same things to us when we were kids. So that was pretty interesting. So she's like, oh, I'm not like mom, and then watching the interactions with the kids at home, it's kind of funny. Like maybe she didn't realize that, and I wouldn't say anything, but I would just kind of like, laugh to myself.
Well, this quality of being somebody who takes adversity and turns it into helping other people, they seem to have that in common.
Yeah, absolutely. So she has a lot of faith, so that's kind of what she's holding on to right now.
Amazing. When Matthew, when you told us about how you met Rachel, was this the person
No.
who introduced you? Oh.
No, different brother. This brother probably would have said, "You stay away from my sister." Well, Nathan was saying you need to date her.
Oh, I see. Well, I appreciate that story. I found that story very moving. Those photos that you were showing, do you have anything you want to tell us about them?
Sure, I'll tell you what's happening in this. It's an older photo. It's me and Rachel standing in front of a tree, and she's pointing over to me. If you want to pull that up, I can walk you through exactly.
The one where she's got a very wide smile going on. Yes.
It's a victory smile. Yeah. So what was happening there is we were at an apple orchard with her family that day. We were taking photos, and I didn't like to smile. So we were posing for a photo, and she took that as a challenge. So she kept goofing around and doing everything that she could do to make me smile. And then finally she did something goofy enough to make me smile. So then she felt, victorious there. She was gloating like, hey, look, I did it. But that was Rachel. It's like she wanted to joke around and put smiles on people's faces. I mean, that's who she was.
It's who she is, brother.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You're going to make it. The two of you are going to make it. And as we talked last night, this is only phase one. Okay.
Right.
We still got to catch this monster. That will be phase two. You're going to get all that. We talked about this last night, but maybe for Michael to hear it. You're going to get all that immediate attention. It's all going to come again, full at you at 100 miles an hour. Then phase three, he's going to have all the court stuff, the arraignments, and you're going to want to jump over that railing. Okay. Of course, you can't, right? That's the hard part. One of them. And then, the trial, you got to put up with that and the way our system operates. And then, of course, at some point, if there's a conviction, then you'll have your opportunity in the impact statement. And that's when you can let that individual know. And then from there, cut him loose. Let the system deal with him. On the other side, even in the joint, they have rules. And if you violate those rules, women and kids, those usually aren't a good combination if you're coming in. Long before you ever hit a particular yard, they've read your jacket and they know who you are and what you are. Long before that. And, at that point, we'll see how tough he is. Odds are, like Dr. Brucato has pegged him, he's nothing.
Right.
And, so that's when you just keep on, you keep on trucking, as they used to say, right? Back in the day, just keep on. Don't look in the rearview mirror. Your sister would never want you to do that. Your ex-wife would never want you to do that. You just keep moving forward. You have to. And, we all, that's what life is about, unfortunately. And I don't get it. I don't get it, and I never will. But I can tell you, I've given this speech 100 times to families. And after it's all over, I've made friends for life. And, it doesn't change the circumstances, even, to any one of us. We can't unring the bell. But you can stay persistent. You can stay, vigilant. You can stay strong. And a clarity of focus, like anything else, is I know the two of you are on a mission.
Right.
And you'll accomplish it. I've seen that look before, many times in each of you. And Gary and I are right with you. This platform will be a safe place for you. As you can tell, there's no drama here. We don't do drama. None of that. Only facts, only information that will provide results, if possible, for the investigation without interfering or compromising the investigation in any way, shape, or form.
Right. Well, Chris, I have to tell you, based on experience and other offenses, I do think this case is going to get solved.
I do too, Gary.
He's not a particularly bright offender. He's impulsive. He can't help himself. So there's going to be some other offense. He's going to trip up. They'll probably find a very long trail of crap that he's done throughout his entire life. It's just a matter of when. If he's slipped over the border, things may get a little more complicated. But I just don't think that it's possible for this guy to hide. That we're living in a time now when people that are developing into serial killers, which may very well be going on here, they don't tend to become serial killers because they get caught after the first offense. Because the time we're living in, we're just too connected with social media, the internet, etc., so that you can find anybody. It's a matter of somebody wanting to find you. The problem with this guy is that, again, getting right back to his childhood and so forth, is that he's invisible. Nobody cares about him. So his invisibility has been turned into a kind of a power by him, right? He he can lurk without being noticed because he's small and pathetic. Nobody cares about him. But the reality is that I think the more we expose people to this image, is what I hope we're doing you a service by doing that. I really think it's a matter of time. I do think that the tip about talking to sex workers is a good one. That I hope law enforcement has heard that and will do that, because this guy is probably not very different than other offenders that have done things like this. The other thing is, Chris, flyers and things that are put out, which hopefully are in Spanish and English.
Yeah.
There are a few places that would be particularly good to put them. For example, you can tell, I mean, somebody grooms this guy. If you look at that sketch, I mean, put them in barbershops, Spanish speaking areas, barbershops, put them in churches. Churches are an excellent place for the community to get together and talk about it. And these are people who would be motivated, especially after hearing this, to do a very Christian act and kind of help create justice in this kind of situation. They may form a group or somebody that desires to help. But the other thing is, it's still a little bit unclear who the target may have been in the home. We don't know if there's any predilection for kids. So that another thing is, around high schools, having posters, you see this guy in the street, won't run away from him, that kind of thing. But it does look so far, it looks so far that it may just be being female that is the activating thing. And as Matthew pointed out, it may have something to do with the size of victims because of his pathetic need to dominate. But I think, Chris, it's going to be all about blanketing and then just waiting. Time. Hopefully he is beaten to the punch before there is a next victim. But otherwise, I think, unfortunately, it's a matter of time.
Yeah, and Dylan said in Spanish, all of that, to the barbershops, to the church. I mean, it's amazing that you said that, because I don't know if he said that in. So we'll have that Spanish clip that you guys can use, and you can send it out into the environment. And everybody, if you're just joining us, that was earlier on. So I'm going to get to some of the questions, but I'm going to, thank Michael and Matthew for being here this evening. Is there anything you guys want to tell the public? I've had you for almost 2 hours, and I feel guilty about that in itself. Poor Matt. I mean, we had him here last night and almost had a birthday with him, while we were all hanging out together. Feel free, if you guys need anything, just reach out. We'd be more than glad to help you in any way, shape, or form that we can. And if we can't, we'll tell you, what, we can't, but we may know somebody that can. We have access. Evident of the fact that, I dropped some bombs last night to kind of move this thing, because I was getting frustrated that it was taking so long. Okay. That, you finally, every once in a while, you get these homicide guys, right? You see that big plaque of stuff back there. Okay, we think we know a lot of stuff, and we actually don't know anything. And we learn every single day, every moment. It's the public that knows everything. And sometimes we want to hold it so close to the chest that we don't realize, okay, it needs to be away from us, and we need to let it go. And I was just blown away by the great work the sheriff's office did by punching that podcast in today. I think that was fantastic. And those are the types of things that move these kind of cases, because he's going to run into that everywhere he goes. He's going to run into it. No.
Yeah, but Chris, you know what the most amazing thing was to me about that?
What's that?
You could take the program we did last night and put it side by side with that podcast they did, and it sounds like they're literally addressing the points that we made.
It's not our first rodeo, buddy.
Yeah, but it was quite amazing. I mean, either we're all in parallel moving along the same thought track, or that it was almost like an attempt to make sure that we were on the right track, but it was so precisely the same. Matthew, you noticed that too, right?
I did.
They were like, it was like exactly the same points. So my guess is it's because they know what they're doing, and they have experience like that we have, Chris. So that
well, I hope that they're going to get this guy. There is no doubt that sheriff is motivated.
Yeah.
He is beyond motivated. And I love that guy for that, because those are the kind of guys you want that will lift every single rock, every single piece of paper,
Yeah.
and flip every page. This is the type of case that it's that much information right there will solve this case.
Yeah.
Somebody saw him.
Yes.
You've got multiple witnesses on the path that saw him. That means somebody in those surrounding areas, because, you know, to your point earlier, Michael, this guy is very comfortable. He's very methodical. He's thinking through the next move. He thought through the first couple of moves. They call that pre-incident behavior. Right? Incident behavior, and then post-incident behavior. Right, Dr. Brucato? Right? In a criminal behavioral analysis aspect for the BAU. Go ahead.
But once he activates,
then
we get into impulsive and ferocious.
And that's where he comes in. Okay. But, you know, my background was criminal behavior analysis. I was trained through the BAU. So, you know, I understand the game. Okay? And this guy was thinking through, he knew exactly how to get there. And it was a matter of patience, and it was a matter of get it over with. And now that he's done that, as Dr. Brucato says, he's on the build. He's on the run up again. Okay.
That's right. But Chris, it's not Maryland and California I'm worried about. What I'm worried about are police jurisdictions in the places in between, where a person like this could commit offenses that slip through the cracks, where they aren't looking at DNA. They haven't, because it is impossible to believe that there isn't going to be a long trail. This guy can't help himself wherever he goes. He didn't get, unless he was on an airplane, he didn't get from California to Maryland over, in one day. So what did he do all along the way? Where was he? Where is the mass of sightings that you would expect in between? There have to be people that are calling up and saying, oh yeah, I saw him, but it wasn't in either of those states. He was here. Yeah. So somewhere along the way, you're going to start to see that there are things that look like petty burglaries, shoplifting, etc. If this is a transient guy, where's he getting the stuff that he lives off of? Where are the toiletries coming from? Where does he get food? So you have to picture a person that along the way is probably stealing, getting into arguments with people, perhaps going with sex workers, being violent, etc. And I think that eventually, once captured, we're going to discover he was a pretty busy boy, between his offenses, because that's typical of this kind of guy, So I think the problem is it's just not being linked to him. It's very difficult to believe that this is all he's ever done. So, and then the other thing that we're going to find out is everything in his life preceded the first offense. I do not believe the home invasion was his first.
No, he's got a trail.
No, that was an MO also, he was playing out. And so, but it's probably, my guess is that we're also going to find that there was a lot of burglary and things like that going on with him. Typical of a person that feels entitled to take because it wasn't ever given to them. But anyway, we'll see what happens. But I just also want to echo how thrilled I am that you guys came, because I think it works. It goes so far in terms of the humanization of Rachel, in terms of moving us more and more and more in the right direction here. And I think also helping us in our mission to draw attention always to the people that are affected by crime rather than the people who commit it. That's the whole idea, because we want people who hear this, people in the world, to understand that committing a crime should not be a means of developing a sense of greatness or importance or power or domination or control. It should be a thing that shames you and puts you away and ruins your life. And wouldn't you say, Chris, that's an essential thing for us to help people understand? Does that you think it's a way out of obscurity and smallness?
Yeah, I think you guys, you already know what direction you're headed, and you just stay the course. Stay the course. I mean, people are talking about his cauliflower ears and all this other stuff. I mean, okay, yeah, so he could have been a boxer, he could be an MMA, whatever. Okay, those are possibilities, but those are the people that aren't going to talk. Those are the guys. when he left LA, he called somebody in Maryland. He said, "Hey man, you got room." And he left LA, he may have jumped on a bus and, taken it east, gotten off, hooked up with his friends, colleagues, or whatever. He's probably in the trades of some sort. He's familiar and comfortable in drainage ditches. Okay. That was a familiar environment for him. That wasn't an accidental selection. That was because I'm used to it. Okay. And I know I can manipulate, get what I need here. This is a perfect environment for me to select my victimology, immediately do my dirty work, and I have an escape route, things that I'm familiar with. So it won't surprise me if they hook this guy up and they find out at some point, he had worked in, maybe the streets or something to that effect in some city somewhere.
Well, he probably had used similar techniques for robbery, if I had to guess. Years ago, we're probably going to find out that, it's typical of these offenders. We're probably going to find out that he would ambush, somebody and mug them or something like that. He's got some experience with.
Well, he knows how to get in the house.
Right, ambushing
with 4 or 5 people.
Right. My guess is he started out robbing, but we'll see.
We'll see. But any other thoughts, Matthew, Michael? Any questions that we can help you out with? And we're going to let you guys run.
I could pass to Michael. I had the word yesterday about asking everybody to send the photo, but now the sketch around and to send in the tips. So anything to Michael?
Yeah, I guess the same thing, putting out the sketch to everyone. You never know. You send it to someone, that person may recognize them. Somebody is going to recognize him. Somebody knows him. No one's an island. So yeah, I guess, just sharing it, it's so huge because, one person that's going to share it, there is going to be a person that's going to share it. Someone's going to see it. Someone will recognize them. We'll get the name, and we'll catch the guy. So yeah, that's basically it. Sharing this and, just, praying, if you guys, anyone wants to pray for my mother and, for Rachel's 5 kids, I'd be very grateful for that.
Very well. Yeah, done. Can you guys do me a favor? Ask the SO to check the RN. It's called RN number on the label. Okay. You can there's a website they can go to. A lot of agencies don't know this. Okay. But that RN number can tell you exactly potentially where that hat was originated. If it came from Amazon, if it came from Walmart or wherever. Okay. It's a very small thing. I've solved a lot of murders by an RN number on clothing. And that is a Federal Trade Commission number if the hat was made overseas. Okay. So if that was an imported hat, then the federal government traces those pieces of clothing. Okay. And you can get the lot number, the date it was manufactured, where it was manufactured, where it was shipped, where it was delivered, and the type of retailer that bought it. And then, I've literally traced clothing to malls across the street from where homicides had occurred.
Wow.
So that's how you'd be surprised what kind of information you can get. If they have any clothing, that was maybe the suspect peeled his clothing off and they have it. Check that RN number because that could tell you where it was sold. And then you can, they can do their math from there on video, on, receipts and that kind of stuff and reverse engineer the purchase. So as small as that is, please talk to your investigator and ask them if they're familiar with it. And if not, please share that information with them if you would.
Chris, it's so interesting to me as a shrink looking at this hat because if a patient of mine walked into that hat, my thought would be that, the hat projects what it is that he wishes that he was, which is tall, a winner, and a kind of belonging to some kind of team that works together, right? So you could tell about that. Three things he feels about himself: a small and pathetic, a loser, and somebody that doesn't belong to anybody, to any kind of group. And it's exactly the way we profiled him. There it is, right there in the hat.
That's why I love you, Gary, right there. The simplicity of
thinking Sherlock Holmes to figure it out. One glance at that hat. But anyway, that and the funniest thing is he left it in the house. It doesn't take you think of the symbolism of that.
Yeah, we can thank the person whoever knocked it off him. Hopefully,
well, that's what I'm thinking. But
right. Matthew, Michael, thank you so much.
Yeah, and Matthew, I hope that in our attempt to kind of sketch the kind of person that you're dealing with, I cannot help but believe a lot of this is going to be borne out when this guy is captured, because this is what we do. I hope that it helps you in some way, that it gives you a sense of what probably really went on here, that maybe it's valuable to hear these insights and not just something that feels like it's unnecessary or insensitive or anything like that. Our goal is to kind of help paint the picture of a person so that it helps to bring them down. Has it been useful to you guys? Interesting? Anything? Or
I would say both. I mean, both interesting and useful. I mean, for me personally, and also speaking for my daughter, we both just want to understand. I think at some level we can't fully understand, because you would have to have that mindset to truly understand. But we want to understand as best as we can. So these insights bring us closer to that. So I'm grateful.
I hope so, and I hope, Michael, you feel that way also.
Yeah, a lot of what you said had, stuff that I was thinking. Like I tried to put myself in this guy's situation, and I had the thought possibly it could be someone, like Israel Keys, which is, he's not very well known, but as a possibility, I don't believe it. I don't believe that. But then also with the prostitutes, I also think that he might be an alcoholic, or a heavy drinker. And again, that's just from hours and hours of just thinking and being on the trail and being there at night, and everything. So when what you guys are saying, I guess validating some of the thoughts that I may have, when I wasn't in a good space, is helpful. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate you guys, doing this and continuing to have my sister's name out there. Both Matt and I are, incredibly grateful. And,
anytime. Yes. And don't continue to overthink it, Michael. Seriously, brother. Yeah. It's just, this is that guy, like Gary just said, this guy's the guy that you're going to just walk past him and go, yeah, whatever. That's that guy. That's who he is. And this is why he's a coward, and why he chose to conceal himself and attack the way he did to your sister. Okay. So, I think you're on 1,000%. When you see this guy live one day, and you will, okay, you're gonna realize that he's pathetic.
Yes.
Because that's what he is. He's not, he's not like an intellect of any way, shape, or form. He's, like Dr. Brucato said, he's cunning. Okay? And right now he's lucky. Okay? But he's going to run out of luck. And the PD, I guarantee you, is going to be right on him. And you're going to get that phone call just like you did, even today, Matthew. Hey, by the way, we're dropping the sketch today. Okay. And you go, what is that? What's going on here? Okay. I thought we were supposed to know about this stuff. Well, no, that's one of those cards you keep tucked here. And then all of a sudden, you put it out into the public, because once it's out in the public, it's here. It belongs here. Okay. And they've got a lot more behind the curtains, and once those curtains are opened, which they'll ultimately be open in two places. The first one will be the interview room with the suspect, and then the second one will be the courtroom with the media, with the public. Okay? But in that interview, you got to get the guy to tell you why he did what he did, and that's why they hold stuff so close to the chest. But every once in a while, you can push one of those buttons and see the rocket ship go up and go, whoa.
Well, I will forewarn Michael and Matthew that if this offender is anything like the ones who came before him, this subtype, this is not somebody that's going to elicit a great deal of sympathy in a courtroom. This is a person who is going to make you want to leap out of the chair and bash his head in. The fact is, I would expect a cold, reptilian, callous person who dehumanizes the victims when talking about them, and is sort of getting off on the idea that people have had their hearts broken because now they feel like he does. And I think that when that is happening, it's going to take every fiber of your being to control yourselves, because it's, you understand, Chris, you've seen this with your own eyes. And I just kind of think you got to prepare yourself emotionally, spiritually, psychologically for that moment, because I'm telling you, this is not the kind of guy that's going to shed tears and tell you, mommy didn't love me. This is going to be a ferocious person. And also, Chris, I just kind of think it's going to be very cathartic to have the opportunity to do the statement. But I can imagine it going in one ear and out the other with this kind of offender. And that's the other thing. Those statements, don't ever fantasize that it's doing anything for them. It's for you. It's for Rachel that you're going to do that. It's to dignify her, and he's going to have to sit there and hear it in shackles. But I don't. It's just going in one ear and out the other. And I would just say, Chris, I mean, it's going to take a lot of preparation. I don't envy you the task. But as I said to you yesterday, Matthew, and I hope it touched you when I said it, you've really got to sit there and think to yourself, what would my sister tell me to do right now? How would she feel right now? And I think there would be something along the lines of, let's just get to the justice and get this guy, away, and don't, and that's it. Don't give him any more attention. Don't sink to his level, and just tuck him away, and let's move on with our lives. And I think you got to do it for her. That's, I mean, when you say, Chris, that's because the person can't be at peace if you're not.
No.
If a person loves you, they're looking at you thinking, how am I supposed to be at rest if you're not at peace? And so the most loving thing you could do for her, I think, is to show her that you are, and now it's okay to kind of slip into the warm bath of, eternity.
There's an old saying that stick to it till it sticks to you.
Right.
And no man got to the top of the mountain by falling there. Okay. So, you guys, you're persistent, stay with it. God bless you. Our prayers are going to be with you and your families. And you have a platform here 24/7, 365. Matt has my number. I'll share it with you, Michael. And feel free. Again, I always tell people, if you want to throw rocks at 3 a.m, just hit me.
And Chris, don't you foresee that we'll all be back here when the case?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
I think you guys will be back here, and then we'll all,
I think if we put the frog in the bucket right now, and keep that fire on underneath him, it's going to tip, and it's going to tip in our favor. So, I don't give up.
This is 2024, Chris.
Those
are that well.
I got a lot of people in prison, and some on death row, and they underestimated me. That's the way I roll. I got trolls that hate me. I care less. Okay. I'm here for you guys. I'm here for Rachel. I'm here for other families. And, that's why we're here. I work with the Cold Case Foundation. I got 3 other murders going on right there. One of them, we are that close to slamming the door. Okay. And we recently solved some other stuff that I can't talk about that, the agency was like, holy crap, and that's because we assembled a team of experts. But they were cold. This case isn't cold. This case is so hot, it's going to keep cooking. And I think the SO said it today and confirmed it. So anyway, aloha, you guys, as they say in Hawaii. Piaka mai, stay above the water line. Okay. And if you guys need anything, you have a couple of friends here. Okay.
Okay.
All right. I'm
Thank
going to
you, Chris.
drop you out real
Thank you,
fast.
Dr. Gary.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Chris.
You're very welcome. It's a pleasure to meet you, Michael. And Matthew, thank you for writing today. Stay in touch.
Thank you.
Okay.
I will do.
Bye-bye.
All right. Gary.
Yeah.
Love those guys.
Yeah. Lovely. Lovely. You really get a sense of a very beautiful family.
Yeah. And you know, we've got so much going on here. I just, you know, we've got a ton of questions up here, but you know, I just didn't feel right rolling this stuff through while they were on tonight.
Yeah.
You know, maybe it's just me, but thank you so much, Lady Butterfly. You're always amazing. We're so grateful that you've been here for almost 2 years with me. Can you tell this man works out in the face and eats share every gym? Thank you, Mountain Girl. We totally agree 1,000%. Share it. Brian McLeod became a YouTube member. Appreciate you so much. Thank you, AF. As always, you are amazing. We really appreciate your support. All of our new members here, Caroline King, I love it. AP, what a great panel. Good news. God bless.
Does anybody have any questions for us?
Yeah, I'm trying to get to them. We literally have a ton of these things here.
It looks like I see some here.
We're so grateful.
It looks like
to
people
each and every one of you.
People are very kind of gobsmacked, you know, by how profoundly emotional the experiences of putting a human face to the victims' families and the victim, and the point of that was that if one person out there who is hesitant to say something, you know, who is being loyal or whatever, or afraid, sees this, it may stir them to pick up the phone and do the right thing. So
1,000%. And yes, Leah, she did run that path often, at least 3 times a week, according to the family, my understanding. And thank you, Eric. There's one here that says, yesterday it was mentioned that Rachel was 5'2". The guy in the video looks like he was about the same height. I think the guy in the video, the authorities have put out that he's about 5'9". Cindy, your attention to this case is so appreciated. Wish I could give more. Don't worry about it. Remember, I hope they catch this monster and they catch him soon. Totally agree. Do you guys have any other questions that are floating in here? Let me grab some here. Let's see here. Dr. Harry, how likely is the perk will brag that someone else to someone about the crime?
I don't think he'll boast, because I think the whole point is he doesn't feel like anybody cares about him. I think that the whole idea is that this guy is isolated and feels kind of insignificant. I just don't think so. I think he'll sort of psychopathically keep it a secret, split off from other people. Perhaps, you know, later in jail or something like that, he might, but I don't think so.
What do you think about this one, Gary?
Will seeing his sketch being shared widely embolden him or compel him to hide? Well, this is very interesting, because it depends. Are we talking about consciously or unconsciously? I suppose on some sad unconscious level, it might make him feel like a somebody. You know, remember when Andrew Cunanan was on his multiple state spree, he wound up on the FBI's most wanted list. And one of the things I say in The New Evil is that you couldn't help but wonder, as he was sitting there seeing that on TV in the hotel room he was hiding out in, if we didn't interpret that for just a moment to mean, wow, I'm the most wanted in the whole country, right? The idea being that a loser nobody cared about suddenly is desired by other people. On some twisted level, I suppose, you know, it'll excite and embolden him. But on another level, I think it'll make him lay low.
Let's see here. Question from Todd. In case I like to do, investigators immediately do nationwide search for similar crimes in the previous few years? Well, there's a program called VICAP. It's called Violent Information Criminal Apprehension Program. And what it is, it's a series of questions, or about 100 questions that agencies can fill out. And what you do is you submit that to VICAP, and then there are similarities. The program will kick out similarities to agencies across the country through the NCIC, which is the National Crime Information Center. It's a teletype system, and it will send information automatically to various agencies saying, hey, there's a similar, and these are the two agencies that should talk to each other. And with AI coming on board, we can see that going to get much, much stronger and much better. So yes, they do put that information out there. And yes, guys and gals, this is the real Gary Brucato. He sits there. I'm looking at the chat and I'm seeing him, all these messages going out there. I'm like, what the heck? Who's somebody? Is he imitating Gary, or is it Gary? It's Gary. Okay, because I just saw him type it and I was like, okay, I got you. What else you guys got going on? Yeah. Thanks for answering my question, Gary. Most wanted. So pathetic. That's right. Yeah. There you go.
Well, Chris, after hearing that podcast, I have to say it was eerie. As I was saying, how eerily similar to everything we said that recording was, and it answered questions we had. Like, it directly addressed things that we asked, like, why Maryland? Is that a coincidence? Did he know somebody there? Was he in Maryland, based, and then went to LA, or was he in LA and went to Maryland? The question of, did he stalk Rachel, or did he pick her random? In other words, they have the same questions we do, which makes me think that the people looking at this case, they know what they're doing with this kind of homicide. This is not the kind of situation like you see in places like, I think, in Idaho and in Delphi and cases like that, where I really think it was sort of like the first rodeo people had locally with those kind of offenses. I think what you've got here is people who know what they're doing. It really feels that way, or have been informed by people who know what they're doing. And it makes me very confident. But I really want to emphasize that in 2024, it is very hard to beat the technology. I mean, you've got cameras on like virtually every street. You've got, DNA technology, fingerprint technology, cell phones that are pinging all over the place. The ability to spread messages like we did tonight, and easily translate things into whatever language you want. Social media, so forth. And so, things like this, podcasts. So I think that in all of the inventiveness of evil, of people who do evil things, the technology is also increasing to allow us to beat them. That's the whole thing. So that you see this kind of perfect arc where you're defeated by the very thing that you're doing. We mentioned Israel Keys. Well, think of Israel Keys. Israel Keys, at the end of his series of crimes, he picks up Koenig, from the kiosk in Alaska, brings her home, and he's repeatedly assaulting her sexually, and ultimately strangles her. And then once she's deceased, he makes her look alive, right? Fishing wire to stretch the eyes open, the mouth, etc. Photographs her. So here he uses photography in a perverse, cruel way, sends the photo, so that leaves the photo somewhere so the father will see it, pay a ransom at the same time that he's already dismembering the daughter, right? But how did they capture him? They captured him because when he was going to the ATM with his car, the ATM was photographing him. And so you see this perfect arc that photography, which he used to do this terribly cruel thing, was the thing that brought him down. Well, you always want to think about that kind of arc, that beautiful narrative arc that happened. Another example of that has always fascinated me is Heuermann. Heuermann throws pizza out in the garbage, and the garbage that leads to him getting captured. It's the idea of a person who thought who literally took women, used them up, and threw them away like trash, right? So that it's the garbage that winds up capturing him. The things that he thinks are trash and should be thrown away turn out to be the treasures that lead to his capture. There's a weird arc like that, a kind of a justice arc. And in this case, I think it's the idea of thinking that he is invisible that is going to be his downfall. Thinking that he's a nobody that nobody cares about is going to be his downfall, because the truth is you can't be invisible in 2024. And so thinking that he's going to use his lifelong power of invisibility to slink through the world is precisely what it is that's going to bring him down.
I love your assessment of just the fact that the type of hat he's wearing and what you had said previously.
It's so true.
Then you're like, oh yeah, by the way, one other thing, the way a shrink thinks,
Right.
I mean, break that down a little deeper for us. I mean, it was profound. I mean, and when you said it, it was like, duh.
Well, yeah, because it's a projection of what he, it's sort of like when people wear shirts that say something, or when they wear a Halloween costume, or when they have a certain tattoo or a thing on their hat. They're telling you something about what they want to project into the world, what they wish they were, right? I mean, that's just the way that it is. Even I, with all my knowledge of that, I mean, I'm sure that I give things away about myself and what's in what I wear, or what I put on social media, except you can't help it. You're constantly revealing about yourself. And here, if we take that hat as a kind of choice by projection of, to communicate into the world about himself, it tells you everything that he would want to be, right? I mean, who is this athlete, Michael Jordan, right? Tall, part of a team, somebody who belongs, somebody who's famous, somebody that's rich, somebody that everybody wants to be, right? And so that I just think it's a giveaway of what this guy wishes he was. And then, of course, in the act where he was proved to be none of those things he wanted to be, he left the hat.
Yeah, and I think that's he's looking at this probably right now,
Right?
going, "Oh crap!"
He left the hat. What's the symbolism of that? I mean, it's like almost Freudian. Like if it were a dream, I would lean. If a patient were telling me there's a dream, I would say the enormous symbolism of what the hat means, and then leaving it. It tells you something, right, about, and you see the same weird symbolism in the Kohlberger case, leaving the sheath, right? So that you, even though it's an accident, it's fascinating psychologically what it reveals to the clever eye.
Yeah, he left his identity behind.
Well, yeah, or he felt he didn't live up to it. And it just kind of, that's the whole idea. And I think that understanding that, then we see that you need an increased ferocity to compensate, right? If you already feel kind of like a loser and you need to compensate, and then that gets screwed up, that's why if Kohlberger is guilty, it's such a terrifying thought of him ever being out again. Because what would you do? You'd compensate for the failed attempt with one that was even more perfect.
Interesting.
Right? Yeah. Well, anyway, any other questions? I'm more than happy to answer them. We did another marathon session here. They got a double whammy this weekend.
You're killing me, Smalls. I'm teasing. On target. You made an interesting reference. One of the questions that came up was what took so long for the sketch. We don't have the answer to that. Just so hopefully we can help you there. But Rich Romero was a cop because his picture was everywhere. That's right. And he wasn't in LA for a while when he got off the bus from the blah, blah, blah. Okay. Yeah, Brad, exactly. And that's that's why we want this out there. We need to get everybody out there, get this information out there. Why the sketch is released now, probably to generate additional leads in this.
But Chris, they said on the podcast that this sketch was based upon the video and eyewitnesses in Maryland and eyewitnesses in LA. And there was a concern, if I remember correctly, there was a concern that, you know, he could have changed his appearance. He could have grown his hair out. He could have, you know, and they really wanted to get it just right. But you can bet that this detail of the face and so forth, I cannot imagine that that didn't have a lot to do with the cooperation of the people victimized in L.A. And that's another question. You know, maybe they weren't ready to describe him right away. You know, maybe they were afraid. Maybe that, we don't know. But it took time to put this together, and they wanted it to be really accurate. And they said something on the video like, you know, they didn't want it to just lead to any random guy. You know, it had to be pretty specific, and they wanted to get it just right. So, and you could, they really worked with some pretty expert people, I think, because they were even from the turned face in the video to incorporate that into the sketch, and they did a great job. I've been impressed all along with the whole way that they're handling so much of this. We don't see the bungling that you see in a lot of these other high-profile cases.
Well, they have the BAU right there on the other side of in Quantico. So they're in Maryland, so they can go, you know, right there and sit down and present the case.
What is
so that's good. So, Gary, how do you sleep well at night? You understand too well what females know and fear. Well, I know. I ask him that all the time, you guys. I mean,
I think if you live a life where your conscience is satisfied that you've lived your values, you really aren't afraid, because anything that happens to you, I mean, what could it really do? Take you out of a temporal existence. And so, you know, as the old proverb says, you know, a happy conscience sleeps in thunder. Well, there's a lot of truth to that. You know, if you go to bed at night and you feel, I didn't do anything today to hurt anyone, you know, I really, you know, I made my peace with my maker, you know, I'm not filled with hatred. You know, I have human faults, but I'm certainly doing my best to better myself, you know, etc. You should be able to sleep. You don't have to be afraid. In fact, I think so much of the heart of the message of faith that people miss all the time is, I mean, let's face it, what's the essence of Christianity? There's no more death. It's beaten, right? Death be not proud, right, as John Donne put it. And that's the whole thing. If you don't believe that, you know, well, within the context of Christianity, well, then it's just a word. You have to believe that death is conquered and gone. It's dead. The last line of that poem, that John Donne poem, is "Death, you shall die," and that's true. And I think that once you know that and you've kind of made your peace with it, then what happens is you know that you're going around and you're helping people, and you're listening to their burdens, and you're so forth, and you're doing it like a kind of a ministry. It's an act of charity and mercy and so forth. And it's hard, but like being a nurse or a doctor, you understand that the point of all the gore and the misery and so forth is that you're going to get to the other side. And that's what we were trying to do tonight. You know, that I think that's why I become so disturbed by true crime when it seems to be about finding the killers fascinating. It seems to miss the point that the purpose of it is to get to the other side, to sort of push through that and help people heal after these horrendous things. And a lot of what I do as a forensic expert is also to treat a lot of people who are victims of violent crime. I spend much of my day talking to people who've been victims of stalking, sexual assault, child abuse, domestic violence, shooting, or other kinds of things, or family members of people who've been murdered. So, just as much as I deal with offenders. That's the other side of the coin. But I hope that answers it, that I think the reason that I can sleep at night is I really believe that what I'm doing satisfies my values and what I feel called to do. And so in a strange way, it's like a mission, and you go to sleep knowing, like, one day my work will be done, and then I'll move on.
You're an amazing human being.
Don't you feel that way, Chris?
You know what?
It's a mission.
I felt, a long time ago that, God lined me up to do what I did and do. And, there's you either, you find your calling in life, and mine and yours are obviously, we don't get invited to very many dinner parties. Let's put it that way. And the ones that we do, they don't want to hear what you do. So I don't tell people, I just, when I go out and I meet with friends, we're going to dinner on Wednesday, for Valentine's Day with my sweetheart. But, people really don't know, they know I have a podcast, but I don't tell my circle around me, this, hey, by the way, go yada, yada. I just,
No.
I know me. I like being that guy that just kind of slips in the back room, and then they go,
Right.
what the heck? Where'd you get all that, the wall of shame behind you,
But remember, Chris, look, we have people here of many faiths, and, but you and I sometimes talk about Christian ideas.
Yeah.
And I will say this. You cannot imitate Christ in your life and not be lonely. Remember that there's nobody lonelier than God. In fact, that's why He created us and exists in a Trinity. It's a lonely thing, and I think that what happens to people who are imitating that is there's a loneliness to them. They're not here for them. The fountain is not for them. That it's water to give to other people. And people like that, when they find each other, they hit it off, but there's not that many of them. That's the whole idea. Not that many of them. There's a beautiful concept in Buddhism I always loved that says that there's this belief that some people who are givers, the helpers of the world, that they're people who've already achieved enlightenment and are able to go to nirvana. But being the kind of people that they are, they choose to stay and help everybody else get there.
I love it.
It's a very beautiful concept,
It is
one of those people. I've known a few of them in my lifetime, but I just think we did a good thing today, because I think that we injected hope and meaning and purpose into the darkness of a family that has been thrust into the public spotlight by losing a loved one. A person that to them was just, somebody that they just thought was always going to be there. It's like losing the sun, or finding out that Tuesday doesn't follow Monday anymore. It's just a fact that you think is always going to be there, and then it's just gone. And I think we did a good thing, So that so shines a good deed in a weary world, as Shakespeare said. So I really appreciate everybody being here, and I suppose we'll see them next week.
All right, let's go to Hawaii, everybody. We love you. See you on the next one. Aloha.
Hard working every day, I'm stressed out 24/7, babe. No timeouts, wish we could fly away. You and I go to our favorite place. Oh yeah, make special memories together. I'll be your company now and forever. I say we fly away, you and me, go to our favorite place. Feeling the sun on my face in Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. I need a summer breeze, some fresh air to put my mind at ease. No cares. You wanna come with me? Me and you go to our favorite tree. Are you ready now? We jump on a plane now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. Don't hesitate now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. We'll never come down. We're going away. Yeah, we're going away. You and me. Feeling the sun on my face in a while.